Hey guys, this is Jan for Chess24. We keep staying in Wijk, penultimate round was played. In this video, we are gonna look at the game between the two shooting stars. Anish Giri with the white pieces against Wesley-So with the black pieces. No Magnus Carlsen today, but instead two of his closest pursuers and probably two of his closest future rivals. Both of these guys have been climbing the world rankings big time recently, have entered the top 10 and are both approaching 2800, are around 2790 on number 6 and 7 in the live ratings, facing each other today, and both also have been doing very well in the tournament. If we take a look at the standings before today's round, Magnus Carlsen is in the sole lead with 8 out of 11, while Wesley-So in second place and Anish Giri only half a point behind. So whoever wins this game will have a chance to overtake Magnus Carlsen in the last round even. Or catch him, depending on the other results. Let's have a look how it all went down. Anish Giri starts with a move 1c4. Giri, mainly a d4 player, can also play e4, and c4 is many times a move order device for d4 players, and I suspect this to be the case here as well. Wesley-So likes to play the Queen's Gambit and Nimzo Indian setup, which is characterized by knight f6, e6, and then d5 or bishop b4. By playing 1c4, White is trying to make that a bit more complicated. Often after knight f6, White wants to go knight c3, e6, the typical move, and now the move e4, which takes black out of his typical patterns with d5 or bishop b4, and is a pretty dangerous line in its own right. So a lot of black Queen's Gambit players don't want to allow that, and instead they do what So does in this game, and they start with 1 e6. Now if White goes knight c3, they can go d5 immediately, occupying the center as they are used to. But Giri, of course, expected this as well, and he goes for another move order subtlety. He goes for the move 2g3, hinting that he wants to play the Catalan, but he wants to make use of the fact that he has not played d4 yet and keep his pawn on d2 for now. Bishop g2, knight f6, knight f3. This is kind of a Catalan, but White is not committed to the move d4 yet. He's trying to avoid some annoying black setups. For example, after d4, one of the main lines is the move bishop b4 check, which makes a lot less sense after knight f3, since bishop b4 would not be check. Another possibility is d takes c4. This is a very playable move in this position, but it is quite different from the line with the pawn on d4 already. Here, after queen a4 or knight a3, it's the play follows its own rules, and White has some chances to grab an advantage here. Bishop e7 is playable against everything, but probably that's not a line Wesley-So fancies. So he plays another principal move, which of course would not be possible with the white pawn on d4. He goes d4 himself, trying to grab as much space as he can. Double-edged operation, especially with black, since of course White already has some extra tempi, and black is really trying to occupy the center and hold on to it. Just tricky, but by no means bad. Castles, c5, e3, knight c6, e takes d, c takes d, and we have a Benoni structure with opposite colors, when black is kind of two tempi down. One because he's black, and the other because his pawn is on e6, but really wants to be on e5. In general, if black manages to finish his development, get e5 in, bishop e7 or bishop d6 castles, he should be in good shape here with a space advantage. But White, Anish Giri, will try to make this difficult. Starts with d3, so goes bishop d6, once again ambitious, trying to support the move e5 with the bishop from d6, and knight to a3. Pretty typical move in the Benoni, hinting at knight b5, but more often than not planning to put the knight on c2, where it attacks the d4 pawn and also supports the push b4. In the game we will see a third use of this knight, because Wesley-So, who has been playing tremendously in this tournament, and I believe he has not lost a game for more than 50 games, he's riding a huge unbeaten streak, commits a mistake here in my opinion. He goes for the move e5, which is very logical, but I think too ambitious in this situation. He has not removed his king from the center yet, and Giri punishes this by finding this third option for his knight, plays a very strong move, c5. Pawn sacrifice in order to clear this c4 square for his knight. Bishop takes c5 is best, and knight to c4, attacking the e5 pawn. Now the thing is, if white were just to regain this pawn on e5, he would have reached a lot strategically. This bishop would occupy and reign on this open diagonal, and the black center would kind of lose support if the e5 pawn is gone. d4 will be weak, but mainly the white pieces will just find it much easier to activate and get into the game than the black pieces. So black, in order to avoid being seriously worse, has to try to hang on to this pawn, and so does with the move knight to d7. Bishop g4, pinning this knight, might look like it keeps the pawn, but it really doesn't after queen b3 or queen a4. It's once again threatened, and black can't really keep his pawn here. So knight to d7, pretty logical, defending the guy. Giri decides to attack it. He already had the tactical option of going knight takes e5, when a combination of rook e1 and f4 would probably win his piece back with a small advantage as well. But he decides on the more quiet move rook e1, which sort of dares black to defend his pawn with f6. Wesley so decides not to do this. And I think he should have, even though I understand why he didn't, because this position looks extremely scary after knight to h4. And if black is not careful here, he could get mated within a couple moves, which is something you want to avoid out of the opening. That's a trick worth remembering, so I'll show it. Castles would be a mistake here, because of bishop d5 check, king to h8. And here, little tactics exercise, white to play and mate, or win a lot of material. Knight g6 check has to be taken, and queen to g4. Typical pattern, this bishop controls the flight square. Queen h3 or queen h4 check is threatened with checkmate. The only move to avoid that is giving up a whole rook here with rook f7. Nothing you want. Nice little idea there to keep in mind, and probably stuff like this is what scared So away from the move f6. I believe he had to bite the bullet here and go for this after knight h4. Now play the move g6. But this is a lot easier said with hindsight and sitting behind the computer here. After bishop h6, white has a lot of compensation because the black king has to stay in the middle, and it looks very scary. So decided to choose another evil. He castled here and gave the pawn back. But now the position stabilizes and white just has a clear advantage. He has this earlier mentioned very strong bishop. This is a weakness, and the white pieces just develop extremely smoothly. Black has problems here. Queen b6 defends this bishop. I'm sorry. Giri keeps pressing. He goes move a4, strong move, threatening a5 followed by a6. So has to react with a5. And queen c2 attacks the bishop on c5 once again with tempo. Queen h5 was also a tempting option. Queen c2 is a pretty good move. This bishop has to move. Now we see why the inclusion of a4, a5 was important. White goes rook to b5. Note that it's once again with tempo. Attacks the queen and is laying eyes on the b7 pawn. Queen to e6. Of course, not taking immediately now, not to allow any counterplay, but just bishop f4 develops the last piece. White has a clear advantage, and black is more or less forced, not a good arrow there, to give up his b7 pawn. A move like rook a7 is too ugly to even contemplate for a world-class player like Wesley So. The opening went pretty badly, but So does the best he can. He develops his pieces, gives up a pawn, bishop d7, bishop d5, queen f6, rook takes b7, and he fights for a draw. At the moment, White's extra pawn is pretty well kept in check by Black's queenside construction with pawn on a5, bishop on b4. So this will certainly be work to convert it. Rook c8, queen d1, bishop e6. Some material is exchanged here. Bishop e6, rook e6. Nice intermediate move here by Anish Giri, the move rook c1, which does not lose a rook. Rook b6, of course, as rook takes c8, while rook takes c1 runs into the next intermediate move, rook b8 check, removing this rook. After bishop f8, queen takes c1, white would just be winning due to the pin. So rook c1, nice little move, forces black to step out of the way, rook c e8. Rook takes e6, queen takes e6. And here Giri, pawn up, I believe, commits his first little inaccuracy. He goes for further exchanges with bishop d2. Makes sense in order to shake up the black queen side, but now black at least finds very active squares for his heavy pieces. Queen h5 activating the queen strikes me and the computer, which is obviously a reason why it strikes me as a better move. Planning to go queen b5. Bishop d2 instead, after bishop takes, queen to f5. Now black has a pretty active setup and even some hopes for counterplay by pushing it h-pawn. Giri goes rook c4, attacking the d4 pawn. Queen goes to d5. And once again, h5, h4 is in the air. Giri plays the move b4, yet again, very logical play, trying to create an outside pass pawn on the a file. But this was the time where Wesley So should have gone h5. And in this concrete situation, this move would even have equalized because white is not well placed to parry the threats of h4 or queen f3 followed by rook e2. He doesn't have time for, let's say, b takes a5 because black goes h4, threatens h3 now, and generates very serious counterplay against the white king, enough to at least equalize the game. So the logical move would be to play h4, stop this pawn in its tracks, but now black goes queen f3. Note that playing h5 also created a luft for his own king on h7, so that he now threatens rook e2. And it turns out that white can't keep everything under control here. Rook c2, for example, to defend this square, runs into a takes b4. White lost his advantage. Therefore, Wesley So had a chance here to equalize things with h5 after b4, but he decided to take on b4 first, which is worse timing because now after queen takes b4, his pawn on d4 is attacked. He plays h5 now, giving up the pawn, probably the best chance. Rook takes d4, queen f3. But here it's a different story. White at the moment is 2 pawns up, it's his move, and he can sort of defend everything by going rook to e4. Covering up the e-file, black has to move his rook to d8. And Giri once again plays the strongest move, goes rook to e3. And we see white has been in time to distract black from creating chances with h4. So as to at least win one pawn back, queen d1 check, king g2, rook takes d3. And here Giri takes a decision that at the very least surprised me greatly. He went for the queen ending with rook takes d3. And after queen takes d3, we have the position that will keep them busy for the next, don't let me exaggerate, 70-something moves. So this is quite a bit of work to win these queen endings. It could very well be winning, but it's always so hard to say because you have to do the trick of defending your own king against perpetual checks while supporting your passed pawn against the enemy queen, which is not an easy feat, as we will see in the game. I would guess that probably this position is winning with perfect play from both sides, but I wouldn't bet lots of money on it. And the reason I'm so surprised is that I would bet lots of money that the position after rook e8 check is winning for white. King h7, queen e4 check, g6. White keeps both heavy pieces on the board. Now he can push his pawn with a5. When not only does he want to push his pawn, but the queen on e4 does a very good job defending her king, while white also has the option to create an attack on the black king with a move like rook to e7. And I believe this would have won a lot easier than what we see in the game. Still, Giri decided to entertain us a bit longer with rook takes d3, queen takes d3, and he played the move h4, safeguarding himself against h4. But here Wesley So reacts very well and grabs his chance by playing g5. He wants to exchange pawns on the king side, mainly to expose the white king and find ways to create chances to give more checks. If black stays passive, he has no chance here. If he goes, let's say, g6, white just goes a5, and black does not have enough counterplay. Let's say check, king h2, queen f3. White goes queen b6, covers this pawn, and at the same time prepares to queen his own pawn, slowly but surely. So you can't do that, you have to keep white busy, and so does a very good job with the move g5, which does not lose a pawn because after h takes g, there's queen d5, and then queen takes g5. From now we enter a kind of endless maneuvering stage. First, these pawns do get exchanged after a while, queen b8, queen e5, queen e3, h takes g, and queen d5 check. Winning the pawn back, I believe queen f3, I'm sorry. Here we have some footage of Wesley So recapturing his pawn, even though we mainly see the flags, Wesley So representing the United States and Anish Giri, of course, playing for Holland. Anish Giri, here he goes queen f3, queen takes g5, not a tough decision for Wesley So. Let's see if Anish will give us another move. I know what he's going to play, but I think we do have it on camera, even though it is hard to see behind these flags. I believe he will give a check. Here he comes, queen b7 check. And now, in order to keep this video below 45 minutes, we have to make a little jump. This is the position after move 43. Black goes king h6, and we're going to jump to, where are we going to jump? Let's say the position after move 61 in 18 moves. We have this position, which is not all that different. I think you will agree to this position. So not all that much happened. Instead, let's jump to the critical spots here. After a lot of maneuvering, Giri finally decided to advance his a-pawn, go a5, but this permitted Black to create his own counterplay with h4, which has been his idea all along. h4 is coming, queen to d3. An excellent resource, because the point is after h takes g3, White now has queen takes g3. And the exchange of queens would not be good news for Black. Of course, this would easily be winning since the a-pawn is queening. So Wesley So had to do something else. He had to go for the passive queen to c8, hoping to sneakily win this pawn with queen a8 check followed by queen takes a5. Of course, not happening. White goes a6 and managed to advance his pawn another square. Next critical situation is a few moves later. After queen b6 here, Giri commits a mistake. He goes for the move king g2, probably just intending to repeat the position once after queen c6 and then decide what to do. But he gives Wesley So a chance to stay in the game. And So takes that chance, goes h3 check. I believe we have this on video. Let's use our body language doctor skills. Oh, sorry, this is too far already. Here we go. To see Anish Giri looks less confident, and Wesley So, who looked a bit desperate earlier after h3 check, I think he believes he is back in the game. And I think he is. I'm, of course, not sure about the objective assessment of this position. I will leave that to computer table basis. Here we got queen takes f2 on an endless loop. But I have a feeling that after king h3, queen f2, Black should be able to hold this somehow, because now the white king is very hard to safeguard against checks, and the queen can't go too far away supporting a7 while keeping her majesty company. So not all that much happens over the next couple moves. Let's go to the highlights. Black goes f5 on move 75. Then there is quite a lot of maneuvering yet again. White tries to bring his king across. Black gives a lot of checks. And the next critical position is reached on move 93. King e3 is played after Black had given a check on a2. And So commits a serious mistake here with the move king to g5. The only way I can explain the move king g5 is that he wants to stop White from going king f4, but he shouldn't have. He should have hoped for that. He should have given this check, provoking king f4, and now there is a beautiful little trick. Actually, there's two pretty tricks. Let's start with a prettier one. There is the move queen d6 check, forcing a draw instantly, because after queen takes d6, it's stalemate. That would have been an amazing resource. However, king f4 is also the other trick, queen h6 check, and after king takes f5, you can even hope for a win, because you pick up the white queen with a score. So there was no reason to stop king f4, but of course all of this is much easier said than done with the computer on move 93, where both players were extremely tired. King g5 is not a good move because it's met with a very strong king f3. All of a sudden, black does not have a check, and white is planning to go queen e3 check and a7. And if this pawn makes it to the 7th rank, then things could get and do get very, very serious for black. Queen a1, we have another long sequence of checks, but finally the pawn makes it to a7. And this position, I have a feeling, is winning for white. There is no perpetual. And in the game, it all ends rather quickly. Queen e4 check, queen to e3. So goes queen c4 check, king e1, queen b4 check, king f1, queen b1, king g2, queen b7 check, king h2. And now black is running out of checks. After queen h7 check, white would go king to g1, no more checks. While after queen b2 check, he would go king h3. There's also no more checks, and in both cases, it looks like this a-pawn is bound to queen. Instead, So tried king h2, king f7, but here queen a3, another strong move. There's no checks, threatening a8 queen, queen a8. Once the queen has to go passive like that, the end is near. And actually, here it comes, queen b3, king g7, queen b8. Why will queen this pawn? To queen f3, he does a8 queen. There is no perpetual because this queen can defend from g2 in many key lines. So decided to resign here, which at the very least decided to allowed the arbiter to go home here. We had the arbiter entering the frame again. Of course, on move 111, they were the two last players to remain in the playing hall. But at the end of the day, Giri's stamina paid off and he managed to win this game. A very, well, not a very impressive win, but a very important win for him against Wesley So, who had remained unbeaten before this game for 50-something games, was on an amazing streak, but it came to an end today. Anish Giri, with his win, comes within half a point of Magnus Carlsen and also, I believe, is 5th now in the live rating list. He passes Vishy Anand. He has something like 2797 now. Anish Giri, the 20-year-old Dutchman with a very impressive performance over the last year, is closing in on 2800. Wesley So, of course, tough day for him, but still had an amazing tournament so far. One more round to go. I would like to thank you for watching this video. I'm very curious what's going to happen in the final round. Stay tuned and I'll see you there. Bye everybody. Thank you.